Okay, and next bullet point, because I think the temperature control was discussed, what temperature needs to be monitored and controlled and maintained. I think you covered that in your presentation, and Christina showed how they control the surface membrane temperature. So I think let's go to the next topic, which is the back diffusion, and we received a lot of questions about that. Um, so let's discuss how back diffusion can be prevented, and if it is observed, how we should address that. Carlos, do you want to start the discussion?
Sure. I think if you well, first of all, we need to know that your back diffusion is occurring. That's not easy to figure it out actually. So most important is to observe your formulation during and after the entire duration of the test. And if you find that your physical characteristics of the dosage form are changing, then there is a chance that you have a back diffusion. So one way to minimize or reduce or avoid is to try looking at different solvent combination receiving medium, because if there is alcohol, and also depends on your and composition of your dosage form, and the if you have propylene glycol or some alcohol in your dosage form, then there is a chance that you will have a gradient of the alcohol component of your dosage or receiving medium seep into the dosage form. So you can avoid it by going to some solvent mixture. See if that helps. I don't know that you can definitely completely avoid it, completely reduce it. I don't know that you can do it, but you can certainly try along those lines. If you have a hydrophilic gel, then you may see water seeping through the membrane. Maybe you can use a membrane that change a membrane, and then that would not allow the migration of the solvent molecules to come up into the dose. So there are some of these approaches that you can try.
Okay.
If you do, I do not know what would be agency's criteria, and I have no clue as to what's acceptable for back diffusion, but we do, I have seen, like I mentioned earlier, I have seen about 6% of back diffusion in one case long ago. And the way we determined that was that we analyzed the dosage form as it is, and after at the end of the 6 hour duration. And in that case, we did the GCMS analysis of ethanol that we suspected migrating, and we did the weight per weight calculation based on the amount that was used.
Okay, thank you.
I would
here
like
sorry.
to see FDA's view on what would be acceptable. How should we go about
Sure.
fixing this, calculate this?
Hiran, can you speak to what is the expectation to see in the application with regards to back diffusion and reporting back diffusion if they observe it?
So I don't have an answer of what is the percentage that is acceptable, but what I would, suggest is, I think I would just echo, like, what we discussed earlier. Please have the visual inspection of your donor chamber, and just if you see some abnormality in your donor chamber, please to repair it. And sometimes we run into a situation where there is something that we talk about the top of, and when we had a back and forth communication, that that they figure it out that it was the back diffusion. So if you conducting a study, and if you see something during the original study, please develop your method appropriately, and so that way it just avoid the further review cycle, and we can go for the one review cycle approval. So just have a visual report and just submit those information to the agency.
Okay.
So you can actually even observe the decrease in the volume from your receiving receiver chamber too, not necessarily looking at the donor chamber if there is a back diffusion happening. That's how at least I remember when I was doing the IVRT studies back in, my previous job. The decrease in the volume, you can quite significantly observe sometimes, but, not necessarily all the times. But that's one of the way to observe as well, and report. Thank you.
When you see decrease in volume of your receiving chamber, you have a very significant amount of back diffusion. So that would be not acceptable, I'm sure. Then you have to go back to developing with a different type of receiving medium. Sam,
Okay.
do you have any opinion, any comments on this? I'd like to hear your comments.
That's very kind. I actually am enjoying hearing all of your comments. And no, I don't think I have much to add. I think you guys have covered it really nicely.
Okay, our next topic is related to steering rate, and this is something that we ask in the circulatory cream guidance to be qualified. There are cases when the apparatus only operates at a fixed steering rate. So
Right.
maybe we can clarify what kind of there is no other option when that apparatus is selected in terms of steering rate.
Right.
So maybe we can clarify if that is acceptable. And then is there a minimum RPM for the steering rate that should be used, or this is something that should be qualified in terms of the IVRT profile and the release rate?
Well, just in the interest of time, I don't think there's anything wrong with the fixed stirring rate. I think maybe the larger question is, I'd like to offer a perspective to people who are preparing ANDA submissions of what it's like to be a reviewer receiving that application, and why you may be getting requests to justify certain things. What that basically means is, can you please just explain? And sometimes it's not a complicated explanation. Doesn't necessarily mean that you've got to go and spend $100,000 and do a study. If you explain, this was the stirring rate selected at 600. Our apparatus, is fixed. It uses clock motors that are highly precise, but they're not variable because they're tied to the cycle of electricity. So we've qualified it. It stirs well. We've validated on these conditions, and this is just the explanation for for the stirring rate that's used. Or we have an apparatus that has this range of stirring rates, and we found that when the stirring rate went above such and such, then we started to actually see back diffusion, and therefore we developed the method to stay below the stirring rate because those were, just explain what your thinking was behind it. And that then prevents us from having to pull teeth, as it were, and ask you to explain by justifying these criteria. And I'm not sure, Josephine or Abhishek or Hiren, if you'd like to comment on that, not even necessarily specifically on the stirring rate, but the broader question of where justifications are sometimes requested.
Right. As you said, if maybe things are not clear to us, the way you present your data, and if the proper documentation is not provided in ANDA, it tends to lead to maybe a little difficulty in following the experiment. So I guess we advise that applicants just provide as much data and explain specifically what they are doing. That way we can follow the trend of thought and be able to assess it appropriately.